Welcome to another episode of VNture podcast, your weekly source of visual novel goodness. I am Mr, and together with Taurus, we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. Okay, today is a special episode, a second year anniversary of podcast. So for this week, we decided to talk about the state of the podcast itself and how we do things. We'll talk about what has happened, what is happening, and maybe even a little bit about what will happen.
Of course, I first wanted to say thank you to all of our listeners for helping support us get to our second anniversary. It's been a very long time of putting out weekly episodes, but I'm glad everyone has enjoyed it so far, and we've still got plenty more to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. And on that occasion, not only to our listeners, but I would like to thank in particular to all our guests that we had in the second year. And in order, I had Lucky Puyo. He had amazing showing on the high school setting episode. And his return with the Anime Expo retrospective adds, obviously, Cultured with Monster Girls and the Worst VNs. Pablo with his takes on boulderinization and Kickstarter. Hutch, and here I have the only note is birds. Tom S. Oh my god, that's that guy. Michael K. Whip Jail, Rusty Fountain, the Romance VN specialist, Bruce Gun Loose. I mean, I noted here soundtracks, but all I remember from Bruce is Little Sisters, okay? Barry V, his fun translation work, Nene-san, about what makes an ending, we talked with him. And then we had an April Fool's joke, full episode with Bruce and Ange. Then we have a very witchy episode with Cub. And lastly, but definitely not least, we had Border in here. So thank all of you guys. We wouldn't be here without you. It was a pleasure to have each and every one of you as guests.
Oh, there are plenty of fun times, and I hope everyone enjoyed. For today's episode, this is going to be a little bit of more of a unique one, more focused around us and our podcast and where things might go. First, we did ask some people on our community tab for any questions that they may have about the backstage sort of processes involved. And so, sure, we thought we'd start off this cool anniversary episode by answering some of your burning questions into the details of VNture podcast. Here's one. If you could make a visual novel for any anime, or property in general, what would it be? What do you say, Amor?
My first take has to be, I want to see a VN about, from Overlord. It's a light novel I read and follow closely. It got, I think it was 5 seasons in anime so far. I want to see that turned into VN. Because, okay, this is one of those kind of stories. Expansive world, a lot of lore that would make for a glossary, I know. But also, something that isn't as common with VNs is that it is an isekai. There's not many VNs isekais, are there?
No, not too many I can think of off the top of my head. Plenty of fantasy, but not so many isekai.
Exactly, so that would be my pick. Not only I love the IP itself, it is bountiful with lore and world to explore, but also it's an isekai, something not often seen in VNs. So yeah.
Interesting. And again, perhaps this might be a little stereotypical for myself, but I would choose to experience a visual novel of The Hunger Games. That book series of a battle royale death game in a ruthless society. I think it would really flourish well as a visual novel. It has good characters, it has good action, it's got great world building involved, and I really like the way the themes evolve throughout the book trilogy. I feel like if you had a visual novel, you could then introduce aspects like choices, or perhaps bad endings. You could see how the characters involve in a few different scenarios, it really gets to flesh them out more, especially some of the more popular characters who got killed off pretty early, whatnot. I know they made movies for the Hunger Games. That's not the same though. A movie adaptation of a book is going to follow very one-to-one, but a visual novel, you get that fresh coat of paint, you get all of the new variety, all the new options you could explore. So I would really like to have seen a visual novel of the Hunger Games. If only.
This is something I was wondering when picking Overlord, but how would the strength of the VM medium would be incorporated? And you suggest that exploration of characters that got killed off pretty early. They get their own what ifs.
Yeah, that's pretty common for VN adaptations to go a little into the unique aspects and to start creating some more content. I mean, obviously some of them keep it linear, but some of them are entirely new scenarios. Like there's been a few with Konosuba, right? So
True.
there's exactly. So there's all sorts of avenues to explore. Yeah.
I think it was from a lens, light novels. I think ReZero had a side stories in books, so that could be adapted to VN. So make a choice whether or not you follow the main story or the side stories, right? So in case of adaptation, those kind of properties that divulge into side stories would also work well.
Now, on the flip side, we've got another question. What visual novel would you love to see get an anime adaptation? Not worrying about budget, studio, or how well the story could translate to the medium of anime. In a perfect world, where the adaptation would be flawless, like Steins Gate level, according to Noah. What visual novel would you want that to be?
Okay, I had two answers to this. Because one is the flip side of what I said in the previous question, meaning what is something very popular in VNs that doesn't really exist or it's not as popular in anime. And I think the concept of taking historical figures and turning them into anime girls is so much more popular in VNs than in anime. So one thing that comes to my mind is Senki. That's quite a big title in which they turned all the world leaders across all the important eras in history and turned them into anime girls. Because why not? That's one part. And the other part, wait a second. What would be an action-intensive VN that could really showcase those duels between characters and confrontations? And I think Muramasa, Full Metal Demon Muramasa, would actually work as well. So I have two picks for that.
Ooh, nice. The Muramasa pick is a great one. Especially the fight scenes. I haven't read it, but I've heard plenty about how methodical the fight scenes are, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure because always when it comes to translation from literary work to work that is on screen, a lot of the times what is lost is internal monologue. And it was quite big in Muramasa about those how to outwit opponent moves and in combat. So I hope they would somehow preserve that aspect. But on the flip side, the spectacle. Oh yeah, the spectacle. Oh yeah.
Okay. On a different note, what VN should get an anime adaptation? I would say a lesser known title called Dead End Junction. It is a fantasy Wild West setting. Cowboys, outlaws, and villains. And you get that whole, the desert environment of small settlements where people have to rely on themselves. And there are bullies who, boss around some of the town's members, and the hero has to ride into town and save them in a dramatic duel. That sort of setting. Dead End Junction was really fun, and it incorporated some, anime fantasy aspects involved. And I would have liked to see more of it, especially something, with more production values, like on the television screen as an anime series. I just think that would have a lot going for it. It'd make it pretty unique, and it really showcase its strengths. Dead End Junction, like I said, was a pretty small title, and I very much enjoyed it. And imagining something bigger and better with that premise and setting, it would be really cool.
Yeah, sounds promising.
We've got another question from some guy. How do you choose topics and guests for the podcasts? And how far do you plan ahead for those?
Oh, okay. Okay. So, to spoil a little bit how it's done behind the scenes, we have, I think from the moment that we started, always abundance of topics, and they keep on growing. It's funny to say even that we have as big of a backlog of topics as we have a backlog of VNs to read. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, but I mean, on the flip side, it's because we brainstorm a ton at a time, and not every topic we come up with is a good match, or some get kicked down the road for months and months and months over and over, right?
Oh, yeah. I think we have some of those that are from the initial brainstorming, from the before era.
Like 2 years ago.
Yes, before the podcast started, and they still aren't realized. We are still refining the ideas, okay? Refine. So when it comes to topics, we just sit down and discuss. Oftentimes, in between recording sessions, we just post ideas. And on the recording session itself, the moment we meet up, is we discuss whether or not it's a good fit. Maybe we should tweak the formula a bit, maybe streamline the topic. This is something we did quite a lot when we had a general overview of a topic we want to talk about. But then over the course of discussion, we streamline it into something more concrete instead of general. So it happened quite a lot.
And I'm going to be upfront about this. MR pretty much handles everything involving potential guests. He reaches out so much, and that's not something I'm as comfortable doing, so I'm very happy he's as outgoing as he is.
Exactly. I'm definitely just stalking all the people and asking them. Okay, that sounded very, very bad. But yeah, I reach out to all the content creators. A lot of them I find through YouTube or maybe Discord. It differs from person to person. But yeah, I reach out to everybody, talk with them, and then we schedule. If they're okay with appearing, then we schedule a meeting. Oftentimes it is ahead of a month, I would say 2 months and a half, around that time on average.
Not only to organize the date of recording, but then also, weeks later is when the recording finally goes live on YouTube for everyone to enjoy. So it can be a long time between sitting down with them and finally getting it published.
Yeah, I think the one that was the most hastily made, I think it's Ange on the Christmas special. I think we kind of sprung up on him and he's like, yeah, let's do this.
That was rapid turnaround, like within days.
Yeah, exactly.
Ange is cool. Let me see. How do you prepare for each episode? Ooh, that is a pretty involved question. Sometimes it's easier than others, like for our read ports, where we just simply talk about the visual novels we've been reading over the past month. Those are pretty straightforward because we've already been collecting our thoughts about it. MR has probably already taken 200 screenshots or whatever.
Take it lightly, yeah.
God, yeah, he takes so many screenshots. So we've already got the material prepped. So with Readport episodes, it's pretty straightforward to just gather our materials and just get our notes down to paper and talk about it in the episode. But there are some other episodes that are a much bigger pain to prepare for, especially sometimes when we talk about genres, where we have to think about the titles that we've read. We got to think about what points we want to bring up. And we got to think about how we're going to tie it together and some of the claims and the arguments we're going to make from our viewpoints. We don't script episodes. This is still very much, a podcast where we speak off the cuff about things, but we do still have some structure behind it, behind how the episode is going to flow, what titles we're going to talk about, and the main talking points. But everything in between is still very much up in the air, for better and for worse, between, me and you, MR, right?
Yeah, and I think it's funny when it comes to preparation. I don't remember precisely which episode that was. It might actually be mystery, when we had to confront the definition of mystery from VNDB to the definition of mystery classically in literature from Wikipedia, right? Mm-hmm. Then we decide how to talk about those and our take of what makes a good mystery on top of all of that. Ultimately, quite early on in the podcast, without even talking about it consciously on brainstorming sessions, we developed a flow of trying to start an episode by introducing a concept, talk about its definition, then chip away at that definition a little bit with our takes and how we view things, which may or may not align with that definition. And after that, we go through examples, and over the examples, we say, okay, it's not that much of a mystery, but this is the element of mystery in it. And we then compare and contrast. So after some time, we kind of unconsciously developed a flow. But ultimately, the preparation is we gather definition and examples. And for the report, as you said, we read those titles, so we pretty much are set to go with our notes.
Mm-hmm. I love how the next question is, do you have some sort of rules during the podcast to make the conversation flow better? For better, for worse, not really.
Oh, yeah.
When it's just the two of us, me and MR talking, usually you can feel the banter back and forth. Sometimes we go back and forth in conversation. Sometimes it's more we're talking about the visual novel we just read, so it's more of one side lectures and the other side lectures. So that's not too bad. Where it gets pretty tricky is when we have guest appearances, and having 3 people on at a time sometimes causes problems,
Podcasts definitely show me how much you miss body language, because that's the thing you look forward, whether or not you can interject someone's body language. Since we're not using that, it's sometimes quite hard to know. Wait, is it my turn now, or is it still Taurus speaking?
Or like you've got a point you want to bring up to piggyback off something he said, but it's like I can't find a spot to interrupt, and then the moment has passed me by.
Oh my! Listen, early on, I think it was number 1 episode with ads, or maybe number 2. I don't remember precisely. I think it might be number 2 with ads. I had a question to ask him, right? But you kept talking with him, or he kept talking about a topic. So I'm like, okay, let's shelve it for later. Then I have another question. Still, can't really interject. Okay, shelve it for later. So until the moment I could interject, I had so many questions. I just put them all at once. I'm like, and he's kind of overwhelmed at that point. Like, fuck. I precisely remember that one. Fuck, I fucked that up. I asked 3 questions in one. Damn it.
Oh, no, poor guy. I'm sure other podcasts could easily fix this with post-production editing. To take out all the ums and the ahs and to straighten out the flow and to clip some parts and whatnot. But since we don't have any post-processing editing, what you see in these final YouTube published videos is what you get. And that sometimes includes the awkward moments between people talking over each other too.
True. We had few instances we did editing, but we are pretty much without editing. We approached this podcast with a pre-production process instead of post-production process. So everything we prepare in advance, all the images you see in the background and the music itself is running as we record it, and we just then post it. If it requires some touch-up, because something happened, then we do it, but it's more of a exception rather than a rule.
Mm-hmm. Another question. Are you guys never sick? Or how on earth is it possible to be so consistent with something that requires your voice? Part of it is just good luck. We haven't been struck with disaster at any point, so thank goodness for that. Keeping my fingers crossed it will continue that way for the next few years. The other part is that we do prepare often and in advance. We try to always have a few episodes prepared ahead of time, ready to be published for the next few weeks. And that way, if there are any problems, we have the backup, and then we just record, more episodes earlier.
Yeah. Sometimes we record them out of order, and again, to spoil a little bit behind the scenes, as we record this episode, 104, we already have 106. So we are prepared for in 2 weeks, but we don't have 105. So we have a schedule, or at least we plan to have, for the month ahead. Then we schedule how to record them so that we can accumulate as fast in advance as possible. So if anything happens, and for whatever reason, someone requests or needs a day off, we can skip recording. And this formula works really well. The golden ratio, let's call it, we found is whenever we manage to record 2 episodes during one recording session, we are Gucci.
Gucci. That's pretty cool. I remember there was, I think, once or twice where we were behind schedule and we had to record something and 10 minutes later publish it out. Day of.
Those are the dark times.
It wasn't dark. We managed. It was fine.
Okay. Maybe it wasn't dark outside on your side, but it was on mine.
And from Ange, what motivates you to continue in a competitive YouTube environment where podcasts are fewer in number, but mostly reined in by super big names like Trash Taste? That is a pretty tricky question, and there's a lot to it. My personal viewpoint is that this whole adventure podcast thing is a hobby. It's done out of personal enjoyment, and I'm not looking to make it a career aspect, or I'm not looking for those sponsorship deals or trying to earn those huge popularity numbers. On the one hand, that would be nice, but on the other hand, I'm viewing it as a hobby, and as such, I'm only putting in so much work into this. And to be frank, this amount of effort isn't really going to result in any of that lucrative contracts anytime soon. Because my goal here is just to make the viewers happy. Even if we get one person who checks out a video and has a fun time for the length of the episode, then I have done a fantastic job at this, and I can be proud of myself. And I'm happy that I can help build the visual novel scene for everyone out there. And so, what motivates me here is just the joy in seeing other people be happy with it. I'm glad that this is helping to brighten other people's day and maybe help them learn a thing or two about the whole visual novel scene. Are we going to compete with a massive podcast like Trash Taste? No, not anytime soon. But that's not really my goal here, and I think that's something that helps differentiate our podcast here with other people's content creations. What do you think about it, Amar?
I mean, I don't want to repeat too much, but I definitely agree with a lot, right? So everything you said, yeah, it's true. This is a passion project, so it is fueled by passion. And as such, because we treat it as a hobby, as long as there's passion, we are here. And what motivates us is, so part of it is we talk about VNs because, spoiler for those who don't know, but we like VNs, okay? So as long as we get to talk about what we like, we will continue to talk about it. You can't make us not talk about it, okay? But then we found out some other things along the way. I have a lot of enjoyment crafting silly thumbnails. I didn't know about that. I tried making some silly thumbnails, and I have a lot of satisfaction from doing that, and that motivates me. What kind of weirdness and silly goober, wacky thumbnail can I make this week?
They're not just silly thumbnails, they are super cool silly thumbnails.
Yeah, all of them have to, at least that's what I set out to do. They have to tell a funny story or a quip or a parody of itself. Also, yeah, that motivates me to look forward to each and every episode, sit down, and then create in a creative way. Think about it. Okay, what kind of silly thumbnail will be this time? Yeah, it's part of the reason. Another part, I get to talk about runs. Okay.
Oh my goodness, and that makes any reason a good enough reason for you.
Yeah, exactly. Then I can establish some in-jokes, such as Taurus wanting to read Evenico, or at least committed to do it. When is it? Huh? When can we look forward to that?
I don't know. Ask me again in a few years.
That's kind of silly thing. And to be honest, one part I did not anticipate that I found as much enjoyment and motivation is having guests. Like, a lot of them are super cool people, and holy hell, I love those episodes. Probably the highlight of my week.
Oh, that's super cool. Aw. And I'm glad that the guests have a blast as well, because I'm sure it makes their week.
Yeah, I always make sure to thank them properly after the recording. So, yeah.
All right, MR. Well, what is the most memorable moment or an episode from VNture Podcast so far?
Okay. I have a funny one. I tried so much to prepare, and to this time, I'll disagree with Pablo on something. I'm sure of it, and it never happened. And I keep trying to find something to disagree with him on and discuss. And every single time we have Pablo as a guest, I'm like, well, he's right about it. So I keep remembering all those episodes with Pablo C.
All those episodes, your favorite moment is just going, so true, Oomphy, with Pablo C the whole time.
Listen,
my heart.
I scoured some old forums for old Pablo C post. I found his own definition of what splits community in types of readers. And I posed the same question he wrote to him, and he agreed with himself. I'm like, wait, I wanted to got you with that. Don't do it.
Oh my goodness. For me, I'd have to say my favorite episode was that one time we had August Hale on board, and we did the waifu archetype tier list. The three of us were ranking best girls of like tsundere, of the dere types, and MR's kuderes. And we all had a blast. There was a lot of joking around and some insults being thrown around and some objectively correct taste being enforced. But we had a great time, and we came up with an awesome tier list.
I did not expect the way you guys were prepared for that topic. I was definitely... I need to prepare better ammo next time, okay?
Oh, it's war out there, man.
Oh my
you
god,
gotta
I did not
defend your
expect
favorite. Otherwise, they're gonna shoot her down, man.
Oh my, that was eye-opening to me, okay? That was brutal. Just climb to S? Come on. Whoa. You better compromise.
Better luck next time.
It was fun, that's true. It was fun. And speaking of funny and silly episodes, I fondly remember the last April Fools that we did with Bruce and Ange. That was silly how we managed to convince them to hijack the podcast for one episode. I felt that was very wholesome, I have to say.
Yeah, that's right. It was a great April Fool's Day joke, if I say so myself. And hopefully they don't get any ideas in their head of actually hijacking this channel.
Listen, I had to exert maximum willpower not to burst out laughing when Bruce was doing the intro, verbatim, one by one from me. Like, oh my god, that was so good.
Welcome
So
to today's episode of VNture Podcast, your
that was so
weekly
good.
source of visual novel goodness.
That was good.
Mm-hmm. MR, how well do you remember recorded episodes?
Okay. I specific. Oh my god, this question. As we pointed out before, when we discussed our production process, we sometimes do episodes in advance. Okay, fine. Then after some time, we publish them. Okay, fine. And sometimes we get some feedback, comments, or questions for this episode. Given enough time that passes, sometimes I'm like having to remember what was going on, especially how. And shout out to Noah Novels, who rebranded himself to Noah Archive right now. He sometimes loves to go to the old episodes and comment on them, and that is an exercise in remembering. Wait, what was going on 30 episodes ago? He made me make notes because not now. I think it was like 20 or 30 episodes ago. I just make short summaries of what was being talked about because I kept forgetting.
Yeah, sometimes we get comments on like really old episodes of people just randomly finding them or wanting to start the series at number 1. And it's like they talk
True.
about a certain thing that was mentioned in the video, and I'm like, oh my god, what did we talk about 2 years ago? And I kind of have to skim through it to try and get myself caught up.
Exactly. Yep.
It's like, oh my goodness, I'm the one who said it and I still can't remember.
That sounds like something I would say.
Oh, yeah, me too. Me too, buddy. Now, what about a wish list? What's something for this adventure podcast that you would like to occur no matter how unreasonable it may be? In your wildest dreams, what's something cool we could do here?
But I think this is what I wish to explore some silly ideas, like very silly. So, for example, so I don't know if that fits even a podcast, right? Formula, but I would definitely want to make some, like we had a lot of fun with tier list. We had a lot of fun doing all the April Fools, and maybe we should make some sort of a guessing game, right? You pick 10 CGs, and I have to guess the VN from those CGs, something like that, something silly like that.
Ooh,
Not to overtake the entire podcast with that, but explore some maybe more silly topics and or ideas from time to time. That's my wish list.
And maybe kind of like a trivia game for any viewers and listeners too.
Exactly.
Okay. Something I've kind of thought about and tried to make work would be some sort of book club where like you and I and whoever else was listening could read a specific title, like something, big, a classic, a long one, like, I don't know, something like Clanad. And we would read portions of it every week and report back in and talk about the updates and the characters we like and where the story's going. I've still never really been able to figure out how we balance that out and how we track the progress and how we'd incorporate it with the rest of a podcast. But some sort of like book club, weekly readings would be pretty cool. Getting to share it with other people and follow along,
Yeah, exactly. This is very hard to synchronize, right? Because not only we would need the same title, but somewhat of a consistent schedule. I don't know. Think about it, because how do you synchronize speed? Do you put a limit? Don't read more than one chapter at a time.
Or like
you...
some games that don't really have chapters or days to divide it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, in a way, what you describe is a more more formalized or maybe more structured report. Because report is basically what was the last month about and what have you read by, right? And you're talking about book club that picks a title and then we both read it. A retrospective of that title, right?
So, I mean, there's some compromises and there's some ways I'm sure we could make it work, although there are a lot of difficulties involved, but it's still something on my wish list, you know?
True. And to be frank, the one time we did something very similar was about Mandemon. And that worked pretty nicely. It was a bit of a change in formula, but we talked about a title rather than the concept.
A short a short visual novel we both happened to read pretty closely together, so we could talk about, its story more in depth.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, and I really enjoyed our takes, especially not all of our discussion have been recorded because we we tried not to spoil on the recording itself. So we went more in depth with spoilers of the record, let's say. But maybe for the book club, the spoilers wouldn't be an issue, and the expectation would be, yes, we are talking about the story more in depth, and we will breach spoilers.
Yeah, interesting considerations for the future. Yeah. Speaking of which, now with the question and answers out of the way, we did also want to really talk about the future of VNture podcast and how we're handling issues right now and where we want to take things. So, MR, how would you describe our current approach to VNture podcast? What do you have to say about that so far?
Our approach, a very hobbyist approach to podcasting, has some merits and has some demerits. The biggest merit of how we treat it as a hobby is there is no expectation. So, meaning I don't need to hold you accountable. We don't do it for money and we are not employed. But at the same time, because we are not seeking fame or glory, we can pick and choose topics that exclusively interest us. I find a lot of freedom in that we can talk about concepts and titles from who knows ago, not the most recent ones. I know that maybe it's not the most popular to pick concepts over titles, because if you think about it logically, when it comes to gathering listeners, people interested in a topic, it often is about title, right? You go to a Steingate's channel to talk about Steingates, right? You go to the channel about Nasuverse to talk about Fate and listen to Fate, etc., etc. Because you have a title, something to centralize everything. If you go to a channel about or a podcast with general topic that keeps switching, it's not the most enticing way. But I'll be honest, I like that freedom. I like the freedom of picking topics independently of, okay, what is the topic I want to talk about this week? Instead of, okay, what's popular and what's trending. And I have to say, when it comes to chasing trends, that would be one thing that would make me tired real fast. And the fact that we don't have to do it, I mean, this motivates me more. Like, yeah, I want to talk about this week about this one concept, about this kind of villain, this anti-hero, or maybe we had the parents in VNs.
We mentioned this earlier about the question we're competing against other top podcasters in YouTube and Spotify and whatnot. I mean, there are some things we could be doing to tailor the content towards chasing new viewers, such as following trends, like you mentioned. We could be talking about visual novels that are more popular, like say Steins Gate or Doki Doki Literature Club, despite what our own feelings may be about those titles. And you usually stick to the things you like, and I usually stick to the things I like, and a few other experimental stuff, of course. But we still decide on our own what we want to follow. It's not like other channels who may have financial incentive to review and discuss and hype up certain visual novels that they're not personally fans of. So that is one big difference in how we handle it, and we get the results that we do because of it, right?
Exactly, and it comes up quite a lot when we talk about with content creators. We often take feedback very closely. I put it down in the channel, we discuss it, whether or not we should accommodate and think about it. But ultimately, what we don't really look into, right? This is probably the biggest difference between us and other creators that we had opportunity to talk with. We don't really look into analytics at all, because that's not the point.
We don't really look into what? I'm sorry?
Analytics. Because that's not the point. We don't really want to appease the crowd as much as we want to talk about what we want. And hopefully it's interesting enough that some people find it useful and insightful. And if not, fair enough. Maybe try next week. And that's our approach. We don't try to keep retention of people. So for example, if a particular topic lands, we don't milk it for what it's worth. We move on because, okay, that was cool. We talked about Monster Girls. Now what's next? And we jump off.
I mean, that also reflects in our how we record the episodes as well. And we have our intro, and it eases into us talking about it, and then we have our conclusion. And it's not like we have any hot takes in the titles, or we go for the rage bait or the very quick smash cut editing either. No, not stuff like that.
Yeah, because that's the second point I was going to mention. Is the second thing I was going to mention is the storytelling. Right, we don't have a story in our episode consistent. We don't have a catchy or clickbaity titles. We like to be frank, in a way humane, and say, okay, this is what you see is what you get. And one trend I really particularly dislike is highlights at the beginning of the video. I really don't want to be like that. So.
Yeah, it's like you see other channels, or not just with podcasting and stuff, but they start the video and they've got like a 5-second clip of the biggest wow or funny moment, and then the video starts and it's still got that same moment in later, so you're just repeating it, and I'm like, okay, well, what the heck? Was I just supposed to watch the first 5 seconds and then tune out?
Yeah, exactly. Is that a trailer to the video I'm watching? What's happening? I personally don't like it. Maybe that's a trend that is very popular and is effective. It's not for me to judge, but I really dislike that trend, and I like topics and videos to be more honest and not deceitful.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I maybe wouldn't inherently call it deceitful, but it's a tactic. It's a chop your way to grab your attention instead of watching the one video as a whole together. You were mentioning the storytelling in the content. And, a big reason we perhaps don't have that as much is because we don't script our episodes. And since we don't have any editing in the end, it's very much an honest, raw speaking points about whatever we bring up, and about the titles, about the visual novels, about the genres, about talking with the guests. And I like that direction that, we take with our podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly. We hope to have some coherent flow and to story to develop in the video, but the way we do recordings lends itself that some of them aren't as clear cut as typical fully scripted videos are. So that's the biggest difference. We have more of a raw take on the conversations.
But hey, like you mentioned, since we're doing this as a hobby, that's fine.
Exactly, yes. And another point, what is becoming apparent by doing this as a hobby, we have tendency to have what I coined during one of discussions is growth stoppers that I identified. Since we don't chase trends, we don't really notice as much the analytics at all, right? Then there are some areas that are easy for us to miss or we take for granted, like, oh, it's good enough, even though we could improve. And even in the span of 2 years, we noticed that the layout itself took so much space in the original idea. We kept changing, modifying, and even now we're kind of on the cusp of, do we even need a layout? Should we have those things full screen? I don't know. At some point, probably the funniest example is on the layout itself. Very early on, we established, we would like to have some sort of icon, a banner or
logo.
Or logo, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, logo. That depicts an adventure, something to venture into, and hence the name, into a forest with a road. We make a sketch, and it's since last 2 years because we felt, oh, it's good enough. We'll finish it someday.
Yeah, that was just supposed to be a placeholder. In the bottom left with the forest in the book and the road leading it. Yeah, that's first just a placeholder, but it's grown on me.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite silly, right? And we said it's good enough, and we never touched that. To be frank, I want to improve, but it's a slow process. We take all the feedbacks we get into consideration. When something goes badly or maybe not so well, we try to refine it. But ultimately, since there is no career incentive or something like that, it is very slow process.
Because we're still, hopefully meeting our goals of providing enjoyment to people. And so any improvements we make are just going to be icing on the cake, ideally.
Exactly. Because ultimately we wish to provide a content that is worth what is the most expensive and most important for people, their time. And to continue improve the quality is to provide them with a better and better experience for their time spent. And that's what I would wish for us to continue, or at least maybe even accelerate a little bit, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and probably another point of contention that I reminisce when it comes to the podcast, it's the advertising, or rather the lack thereof. Because outside of me reaching out to other content creators to collab, we don't really advertise at all. And especially, I'll be honest, I don't like social media. Just like you are thankful for me reaching out to people, I'm thankful that you are the Twitter guy, okay? I just can't. Social media is like, no, I can't.
I feel you. And even then, I don't do as much on Twitter as you would expect to be called the Twitter guy. I basically just monitor it because also, like you said, I'm not too keen on advertising either, and that's just a personal thing. It would be nice to, encourage more people to check it out and to bring more happiness into the world. But we want to focus on the material itself. And so if it means some people we just have like regulars or a few people who just stop in every once in a while, those are the important parts. I don't really see myself being very driven to make this podcast get massive success.
Exactly. And to go back a little bit to the opportunities, because that's what it lends itself to be. Opportunity not taken can be an opportunity lost. And given how YouTube grows and introduces new features, not all of them we grab onto as maybe we should or maybe we could. For some time I tried the community notes, and it's pretty fun to come up with silly ideas. And at some point I just stopped because I didn't have the time. I had other errands to run and I didn't keep up. I want to get back to that because I felt like we had a good atmosphere on those. We had some generic questions and or silly topics with one options out of few, because I liked the polls in community tab. That was always an outlier, a kind of black sheep option. So sometimes silly, sometimes weird. I kind of like the humor in that.
There's another point you mentioned about the opportunity costs and whatnot, and that got me thinking, is that there's no real consequences to us running the podcast. It's not like there's any funds we have to pay for upkeep. It's not like we have to pay any dues to anyone. It's not like, we're depending on this as a source of income. So we're very free from a lot of the pressures that other hobby avenues might cost. With us, it's literally just, we have our equipment and we just meet up to talk. So that
Exactly.
makes it very simple and clean and cheap.
That's our equipment, our time. And recently, which we premiered with this episode, we commissioned some artworks. And this time we get some Luna new sprites.
Yes, hooray! We got Luna sprites in the thumbnail, in the house. Woo!
Yes, exactly, because I was really running out of ideas how to use those 2 official Luna arts I got on all the thumbnails.
And maybe incorporating Luna's 3D model.
Oh yeah, I tried a couple of times to different success, okay?
No. Thankfully, it's looking better in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And the guy that we commissioned from, Jafarero, he did a really good job. So hopefully we get some very banger Luna poses next episodes.
Counting on you, MR.
Exactly. As silly as I can make them, okay? Yeah.
So even though we have a very more laid back outlook on our whole content creation aspects, the good news is that we're not going anywhere anytime soon, so we can keep this little project chugging along.
Exactly. And like I said, I want us to improve, although it is slow process, okay? At least I have to say we have fun doing it. We're here and we're fueled by passion. And so far, hasn't let us down. And I think that's a very good sentiment to end this episode on. So thanks to all our listeners to listening in to this special anniversary episode in which we discuss all things related to podcast itself. I hope you enjoyed, and a special shout out once more to all our guests throughout the year. Thank you guys. We couldn't be here without you.
Yes, we couldn't be here without any of you listeners who are very graciously donating your time to take a listen. Thank you again. I hope we'll see more of you in the future.
VNture out.
VNture out.